Hi everybody, welcome back to our conferences from the knowledge of oneself. We're now in our 9th conference. We already talked about different topics, issues in the previous conferences. You can still watch them. You can go through our Facebook website and page, and then you can find in the video section all the conferences that we were teaching you previous weeks. We were talking about astral projection, we were talking about the energetic centers of the body, which are different from chakras. We were talking about the aims of this knowledge and many more topics that are related to the liberation of the consciousness. Okay, so today we're going to talk about something that is very important, but like a lot of people are like currently not focusing on this. They tend to feel kind of uncomfortable towards this topic, but I find it very important, and also other people who are working on themselves in this consciousness path, because this will help us reflect upon our actions, our deeds, and where are they gonna take us if we keep going the same way that we're actually doing now. So it's really important to become aware of the consequences of our actions, and to also acknowledge the fact that we have not only higher dimensions, but we also, as the law of polarity and also correspondence says, there must be also an opposite, a dual. So everything is working in a dualistic way in this world. So we find also these lower dimensions that are not only on planet Earth, but also within ourselves, as we talk about also on another conference about the dimensions. The dimensions are also within ourselves. So the order that we're suggesting here is that we start within, so we can find the others outside. So to find our inner dimensions, to work on them, and then we can start looking at the planet's Earth's dimensions. So the same is here. We have the outer dimensions and we have the inner dimensions. So we have to focus first on our own infradimensions, lower dimensions, and then we will be also working with the others that are from planet Earth. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so whatever occurs in the planet Earth also occurs in our inner world. So as the law of correspondence says, we're referring to the hermetic principles, which are very important, and they kind of sum up most of these laws that most human beings don't really know, that ignore because of the lack of consciousness and wisdom nowadays. So we're now living in the Kali Yuga times, so that's pretty common to not know all these laws that are ruling our universe. So if we find issues outside in the world, like we see nowadays, like war, like people behaving in very not like human, in a human way, like kind of very aggressive, violent. We see like lots of these things nowadays, and we have to say that all of that is also found within ourselves. So that's why we say that everything that occurs outside is because we find it within ourselves. Even if we don't see it, even if we don't know it, sometimes there are parts of us that must be unveiled so we can start transforming them. So if we transform that, the outer space, the outside, the external events will also change. So that's why it's so important. And yeah, this will help us understand many things about our own psychology and like the current state of our world, right? All right, keep going. So we say that the infradimensions, like our own infradimensions, are found in the lower abdomen, and we find there the 7 gates that lead us to the internal infradimensions of our atomic health. So in previous conferences we were talking about how we have different parts of nature within ourselves. Yeah. So we were talking about that in the dimensions conference and also in the 7 centers. So in the lower abdomen we find the instinctive center, and there we said that the element is the water. So we find the inner waters that are our creative sexual energy that is found there. And so in those waters they kind of keep like a register, or they kind of keep memories of many of the things that we perform in the outside world, the impressions that we receive from certain circumstances, thoughts, desires. Everything is kind of stored in that part of our energetic bodies, energetic centers. Sorry. So that's why we said that here we find the atomic health also, because we find the atoms, the metallic atoms there, right? So we said that our metallic atoms are which we call our psychology. All of the psychological eyes or defects that we have been created, they are found in there, in that atomic health or atomic metallic waters, that is our mercury. So this is very related also to the alchemy process, where we find the mercury that needs to be then transformed into gold. Alright, so we human beings have 2 psychological moods, or like aspects, the outer moon and the inner one. So as I said before, this is also so related to the correspondence principle. So like everything we find within is also found outside, right? So the same for our psychology. We kind of have these 2 so-called moons in the esoteric teachings, in the ancient esoteric teachings. And the moon is also like well known in many religions and cultures, to have like this connection with our psyche, with our feelings, with our emotions, right? All the emotional parts of us, but also like our minds. Yeah. So in here we are referring to that. So this first one is the outer moon, which is the visible one. So it's like the face of the moon that we kind of see, for example, at night. That is like the shiny part of the moon that is always facing the earth. That's the part that represents also our own moon, our own visible moon. So as the moon rules the psyche, we're talking about the defects. So those are the defects that are visible to us, just like the moon. And then we find our own infradimensions. It's related to that. But we also have the inner moon, which is not visible, which is also called like the black moon or the hidden moon. Yeah. So that one is what we call the inner moon, and it's related to the seeds of ego. So we know that the seeds of ego are the 7 deadly sins that we commonly have heard from religion, but we don't want to talk about religion here. So these 7 seeds of the ego are mentioned in different beliefs around the world. Yeah, so it's something in common. It's something that is found like in common between many cultures. So these seeds of ego are found then in the planet Earth's infradimensions, right? So you see that one is related to the visible, the parts of us that we know, that we kind of perceive, that we know that I am this way, I know I like this, I know I prefer this stuff, I know I like criticizing, I know I like judging, and I like gossiping. Those are parts of us that we see. But then in the inner moon are the other parts that are very hidden within our psyche. Yeah, so those are the ones that are related to these planets, planet Earth's infradimensions. Right? So we know that 97% of our creative sexual energy is trapped within our multiple psychological elements. As I said before, we know that our creative sexual energy is also our waters that we mentioned before, that are in the orange dot that you see here, the instinctive center. Yeah, so in there we find the water that will be later transformed into that creative sexual energy. And that's what we said before, that we found there the 7 gates of hell, the hells, the inner hells. And that's where we find the psychological elements, which is the 97% of us. That's a lot. We have mentioned that in previous conferences as well. So we need to descend to the infradimensions, to our infradimensions, our own infradimensions, in order to rescue that energy that we have lost, in order to create ourselves internally. We'll see. Alright, before going there. So why do we have to go there? You might be thinking, like, why do I have to go to those infradimensions? That sounds kind of very not nice, you know? Well, thing is that our defects, our psychological defects, our desires, emotions, thoughts, all of them have captured certain amount of our spark of consciousness. So if we know that we have this 100% of consciousness, that will be what we find joining all the things all together, so we're here making a distinction between the 3%, that is the free consciousness, and the 97%, which is the one that is being trapped by our ego. So we have to go there, to those infradimensions, in order to rescue those sparks that all of our defects have stolen or have taken away from the rest of the consciousness. Because it is said that those parts of us were very naive and ignorant. That's why we got involved in all these egotistic actions, thoughts, and desires. Because those parts of us, those little sparks, although they were kind of, let's call them light, they were white, pure, they got like kind of trapped, and then they become dark because of the ignorance they had. So those parts of us, we need to rescue them. We need to dissolve the ego. We need to take away, kind of separate the real part of it, which is the real spark of light that already gained the wisdom through suffering, through pain, through all those hard circumstances that we have been going through, not only in this existence but in previous existence. So the spark has kind of obviously been trapped by our ego, by our defects, but at the same time it gained the wisdom, right? So that wisdom, that spark, that light, that's what we need to rescue from there, from our own defects, just to make it very clear. Why do we have to do this? And once we do that, well, we will be recovering all those little sparks and joining them back to our consciousness to make that 3% a little bit more, and reach like a bigger percentage. Okay? So the inner world is divided into 9 infradimensions. So we always hear, we kind of always perceive the word hell like just one boiling pot that is found within the planet, right? But let's say, like, yeah, that's kind of part of it. Many cultures have described that as well, like with the same characteristics, like boiling hot. But it is divided in certain stages, like in certain circles. That's what we're going to talk about now. The distinction between all these infradimensions or circles. So we find here the 9 infradimensions or Dantesque circles. Why Dantesque circles? Well, if you don't know, just to make it clear, Dante Alighieri went to this through this experience. So many people think that what we find in the Divine Comedy is just fiction. It's just something that came out of someone's head and mind from a very specific part of his life. But actually, he was working towards the initiations, the esoteric initiations. So his master Virgil, it is said that both of them were together, like learning, practicing, like discovering all those ancient kind of knowledge, and they were kind of experimenting with that. So at a certain point, they went to this state of astral projection. Using the astral projection, they entered the 9 hell circles, right? So in the Divine Comedy, you will find mostly what we are saying here. So I just want to make it clear that it's not just fiction, that he was actually a student of all these esoteric ancient teachings along with his master, and he could actually witness with his own eyes in the astral dimension all the suffering, all the horror, all the terrible things that he saw there. It's just what he could see while being in his astral form, right, with his astral body. And this is something that anybody can do. If you're practicing astral projection, we were talking about that in our 3rd conference, you can do this. Obviously, this is something that you need to do if you have like a very strong purpose on working on yourself, right? So if you want to see your own defects, like which defect is the biggest that I need to start working on and transform, and like take consciousness sparks from through meditation, through different practices. So yeah, this was just to clarify why Dantesque circles. So it's because of Dante Alighieri, of his experience of going through all these 9 circles. So we find here, you see each of the infradimensions has the name of a specific planet, right? Or star, like the sun. So it's all related to the universe, you see? But each of them has like very different characteristics, and we're going to talk about that. So we go from the sphere of the moon, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Neptune, Mercury, sphere of the sun, Jupiter, and Uranus. Okay, these are the infradimensions. So now we will go through each of them. So in here we are going to find not only like a description of what you can see in that infradimension, but also why people get there. What are the defects or parts of the ego that lead people to go to these infradimensions? Okay, so in here, in the first infradimension, we have the sphere of the moon. So this, we find it here. You see in this part of the spine, like the very first bone. It's related with the defect of laziness, yeah, sloth. And those who have not been baptized, we're going to talk a little bit about baptism in the next slide. Just wait a minute. So it's related with the moon and the sexual center. So when we talk about the centers before, we know that this is the sexual center. So in here is where we find laziness. First, and the first infradimension. We know that the defect ruling this center is laziness as well. So that's very like interrelated with each other. So why laziness? We were saying that in this center we have the function of creation. We create with the sexual center. That's the function we have with this one. So we know that laziness doesn't allow us to create. It doesn't allow us to produce. It doesn't allow us to make, to act, right? So that's why it's related to that. Because laziness doesn't help let us create ourselves through the transmutation of our sexual creative waters. It just wants to go in the easy way, do it in the easiest way, just to expel all the energy out instead of transforming it within. So in this center we find the atom of the secret enemy. So I know this might sound kind of how to say it, like a concept, like a religious concept maybe, but we're not referring to that. Everything that we're talking about here in these Gnostic teachings is inner, internal, right? So why the Antichrist? So this is a force that is said that doesn't let us create ourselves, that doesn't let us transform ourselves, to start the path of initiation, to start the path of liberating consciousness. So that's why it's related with Antichrist, and it's called the secret enemy, because it's that like negative or not conscious will of like not doing what we know we have to do in order to start ascending in our path. Yeah, that's why. So we need to rescue the will in here. We need to rescue from laziness the conscious will. We need to capture or rescue that capacity to act, to create. All right. So now that I mentioned before, what is being baptized? It refers to the rising of our seminal waters from the coccyx. I forgot to mention that. That's the location, the coccyx, to the third eye. So this is attained with the practice of suprasex and psychological death. Just to tell you that in our next conference we'll be teaching you the practice of suprasex. It's a very important, essential topic in these teachings, just to let you know. Okay, so and this will lead us to the creation of our first solar body. So we know that we create bodies which are the higher, superior existential bodies of our being, yeah, of our real self. So those are the vehicles we will create with our sexual energy, so we can move throughout the different dimensions of nature, right? So the first solar body will be the physical body, yeah. Although we have it, we have to work on its regeneration, because right now the state of it, it's like full of karma, full of illness, and a lot of suffering. All right. So yeah, the baptism we're talking here about is just raising your inner waters that we have in our instinctive center through the spine, and then take them to this super important gland that we have here, that is the pituitary gland, or the third eye. That's the process that we do with suprasex. And obviously the psychological death is really important, because if we don't practice psychological death, we're not taking away any sparks of light and wisdom, what it's real, from each of our defects, from our ego. So without it, there will be like almost anything to raise through the spine, because if we're identified all the day with different situations, our defects will be taking away our energy. They will be stealing our energy, and we will have no energy at the end of the day to transmute in the practice. So that's why they are so related. Okay. Now let's go to the second infradimension, that is the sphere of Mercury. It is related with our seminal waters and our instinct. Here we find all the fornicators. They do nothing but just spill their seed. Okay, so this one is super related to the first one. It's really, really like they are so like interrelated. And here we have, remember that in the instinctive center we have the memories from all the pleasant and unpleasant events that we have in the external world, right? So it's like recording all those sensations, smells, what we perceive with our five senses is recorded there. So that's why we kind of know why we feel attracted to some food, for example, or certain kind of people or certain kind of places, and why we repel or we do not like certain other things from the external world, places, people, behaviors, food, right? So many things. Okay, so here it's very important to mention that this defect of fornication, we need to fight against it so that we can achieve chastity, which is our goal for creating the 7 bodies, the 7 superior bodies of our being, ourself. And fornication will not let us do that. So it's a really important thing that we have to do, is to fight against it, not justify it, not getting identified with it. No, we know that in the work of the consciousness, through the awakening of our kundalini, through the usage of all this super powerful energy that we have trapped in our sexual center, we need to be fighting constantly against fornication, because it is not interested, or it doesn't let us actually achieve this. It will be really hard to create bodies, to start ascending through the path, if we do not work on fornication, because it will always kind of set or put some illusory perceptions of what any sexual related thing is, but in fact it's just a concept. It's just a mere perception of the senses. And remember that the senses, the 5 senses, help us move throughout this third dimension, physical dimension, but they do not perceive the essential, the spirit, the energy, right? So we should not lie on them all the time. We should also be aware of this, right? So yeah, it's a fight we have to deal with, on a daily basis, and I can tell from my own experience and other people's experience. And also because it is said in the ancient Gnostic teachings that this was the real seat of all the ego, right? So we were expelled from Eden due to this. That's why all the mentioning about the tree of knowledge and the by knowing which is good and what is not good, right? And eating from the forbidden fruit, well, it was the fornication, right? So it's a long story, it's a long process. I'm not gonna talk about it. Maybe we will cover it later, but it's related to that. So that first step that we took at that time, it started all the process of creating our ego through the fornication. So that's why it is so important to deal with it, okay? And to rescue the chastity, to create ourselves, to really create superior creations, and not just a mere need or necessity of pleasure, instant pleasure, okay? All right. So also, it's also very important to mention here the types of fornication. We have not only the one that we know that is like related to sex, but we also have physical, emotional, and psychological, right? So just as I said before, to achieve chastity, we need to learn not to spell our creative sexual energy. Once we start understanding the power that we have there in that energy, that it can help us regenerate our physical body, our vital body, and then create the other superior bodies, we will stop wasting this super important type of energy. And it's also really sad nowadays that people, especially in religions, there is kind of a belief that this is prohibited, this is not like forbidden, like anything related to sex is like dirty, and it's kind of perceiving it with a negative connotation, right? Like lechery, like lust. Well, the type of sexual practices that we are teaching here are all the opposite to that. We can tell that it's not healthy to just refrain your energy and not like avoiding sex. That's not what we're teaching here. We're teaching you that sex is a part of the human beings, but it should be carried out in a more conscious way, so that we avoid the consequences that we are facing now of expelling our energy, which is the energy that God gave us to also be gods, not only to create life and babies, but to create our own selves, right? Just by the practice of this, you will start noticing the difference. And again, I can tell from experience. So yeah, so it's super important to learn not to spell that energy, to actually kind of see it with a different eyes, with a different perception. That's like changing our perceptions of everything we were regarding as true, like the teachings we receive from our family or religion. We should also control the desire. Desires are like the very first point where ego starts kind of unfolding, you know, like the events that we face due to our, like with consequences due to our own choices or our own actions or words to others. It all started in the process of a desire. The desire to have an argument, the desire to blame others, the desire to criticize, the desire to hit someone's punch someone's face, to say something mean to another person. All of that started first as a desire. And here, as we're talking about fornication, the desire is like the main source of these defects. Yeah. So again, fornication, it starts like a desire, and that desire is found also in our waters. Okay. So that's super important to take into account. Once you start practicing, you will see how it's all like connected. Okay. Yeah. So the desire is like the source of all of the strength of our defects. So if we kind of start like saying no to these desires, we start kind of facing them, like, is this conscious? Is this desire part of my real self? Is this going to help me in some way to achieve more consciousness, to be a more conscious person? Sorry. And or if it's doing the opposite, we need to think about that. We need to learn to reflect every time we feel desires, and also the thoughts, because these two parts of us are like the creators of reality, of our own reality. So we have desires, but now thoughts are also very powerful. That's why we say, like in the spiritual or kind of esoteric world, we said that thoughts are creating reality, because everything you hold as a truth, as your concepts, as your ideas, and they are fixed in your head, and then they become emotions, they become perceptions, they become actions, words, right? So they start like a desire, like a little desire, like a thought that is behind all the bunch of thoughts we have. But then gradually it will start reaching the external world. Yeah, so it's all correspondence principle again. So we should study all the pleasures that we receive from from different sources. We're talking here about sex, about all the perceptions we have, the sensations that we get from our senses. Like, am I really loving my couple, like person that I am with? Or every time that I'm doing this, it's just to receive pleasure from certain events, even eating, playing, kind of sleeping, partying, watching TV, suffering, working. I mean, pleasure is found everywhere, everywhere, and it's not only sex. It's many more things that we kind of see like they are normal to us. So it's very important to start to study all those pleasures we have within ourselves. Okay, because those are the concepts that we have created due to the perceptions we received, or the sensations, through the senses, and they were stored again in our instinctive center. Now let's go to the third infradimension. I have to drink some water. I'm kind of thirsty. Alright, so here again we're talking about the same desires. Hey, desires. So this is the sphere of Venus. Obviously, it's related to pleasure, right? Pleasure and desires. So we here see that in the second one, we see kind of the fornication itself. Yeah, the types of fornication. Yeah, there is something that I forgot to say here. So when we say masturbation, yeah, it's physical masturbation. That's part of the fornicator defect. And once you start looking at that, like reflecting upon that, meditating, you will find like so many things that led you to do that. Emotional, like thoughts, not only desire, but many things regarding that action of masturbation, which is not recommended, obviously, for energetic reasons. And the emotional, when we talk about in love, is the self, or is a defect, sorry, it's a defect of being in love. Because we have a perception that being in love is like kissing or hugging and having sex, or just receiving all these pleasant sensations. But that's not true. Love is much more than that. Believe me. Love is a force that is like goes beyond those perceptions we have about love. So powerful and so beautiful. And love is in general, not only to our partner, but like to the whole humanity or the other beings. Yeah. So sometimes we get deceived by this emotion of being in love, which blinds us to see what is real behind that moment, right? So also the in the psychological aspect, we know we were talking about fornication, but lasciviousness is also or lechery is also related, because those are desires that we get from concepts from our mind. So here, that's why we have the psychological fornication. So physical is just through getting pleasure with masturbation or just like the sex practice. Emotional, like the constant feeling of like we want to feel in love, that we want to feel good, we want to feel nice sensations, pleasure. And also in the psychology with the lasciviousness, which is like let's say when we study lasciviousness, we find like so many psychological aspects connected with ideas, fixed ideas that we have of our own reality, which in fact are just that, concepts, illusory concepts that are not real. But the defect makes us think that it's real. Okay, so all of that is connected to desire. So in here we want to go through the pleasure and desire again in this dimension, infradimension, and here we find the location. It's here where you see the musical notes, which also we have talked about in the other conferences, in the me, yeah, that it's like from our stomach or navel, but in the spine, everything we find in the spine. So we have the desire there. Lucifer, which is our own psychological trainer, we're not talking about the devil, we're not talking about the horned entity that is kind of making us suffer because he feels pleasure with that. No, we're talking about something different here regarding Lucifer. Yeah, we call him the psychological trainer because he's constantly tempting us, testing us to see how much consciousness we have gained through the different aspects of our lives. Yeah, so we don't see him just like in a negative like conception or perception. We see Lucifer here, like we know that he's there, we know that we have kind of he's testing us, so we are constantly having tests along the day, along our lives, to see if we have grown in that aspect. So if I am, let's say, a very angry person, like in kind of a grumpy person, And it's constantly putting those little events in my external world so that I feel angry again and see how I react, if I create the same circumstances or if I change them through the transformation of my psychology, right? So at certain point we are studying certain defect that we have to change, we want to change, and then we get like a little test, or can be a different type of test, to see if we have actually understood what it wants us to understand, right? To see if we rescue the real behind that defect. Yeah. So we will see like life like a training camp where we have constant tests that are put by Lucifer, just to see if we have grown and if we have taken away the light and the fire of wisdom from him, because he's got it like that. This very moment he's like having all that trapped, and then if we pass the test we kind of steal it from him. So if we can overcome our desires and we become the owners of our own fire and light, just as I said, to steal fire and light, the wisdom and love from every situation of our lives, and then we start ascending our level of consciousness, increasing it. So the desire is the source of every force. I just said that before, and we have the pleasures that are, I said also before. I kind of mentioned that in the second dimension, but it's more related to the third one. And here we find like pleasures, simple pleasures such as conversations that we love, talking hours and hours with our friends, and then we feel tired and we don't know why. Well, we have used that energy for the conversation, everything is energy, and we kind of run out of it because we don't know how it actually works. The pleasure of eating, that's something that we're seeing a lot today. The pleasure of business, like working or getting more money, that greedy desire of achieving a higher position, social position. Pleasures like watching TV, watching movies. There are like so many nowadays. It's like so hard to count all of them, but you can see it by yourself in your own experience in this existence. What is making you feel like a lot of pleasure? Because every human being is different. So we need to learn to rule our desires. Yeah, we need to study them and to see how the desire is related with the emotions. Yeah, because that's why emotion is the energy that moves everything. So that's why the desire is the source of every force, because it's that energy that leads us to reach what we want. Okay. All right, now let's go to the fourth infradimension, which is the sphere of the sun. Here we find it just like right behind our heart, but again in our spine. So it's related with the equilibrium or balance, and thus the law of balance. So I just said. Here we find the psychological eyes of the squanderers and the hoarders. So it's like opposites, I know, but remember that everything is ruled by the polarity. We have the two poles, so which always are positive and negative, but still, if they are positive or negative, they're part of the same. They're like a degree of the same thing. So we want to achieve the middle, the balance. So these defects converts us or makes us beggars. So here we find the balance. We see that hoarder and squanderer, we can be thief or with the same two, we can be beggars. So the thief exists internally and externally, right? So let's say a thief is not only a person that steals objects or physical things. It's a person that also steals other things from others: energy, time, right? Emotions. It's like a bigger concept of thief, more in a more spiritual way, right? And we have the beggar, right? So the thief just wants to take things for him, to accumulate them, to have them, to kind of feel that necessity. And the beggar, let's say, is the opposite, no? So he doesn't have anything. He just lacks everything that the other is taking. So we need to work on self-observation a lot on this, because we always fall on one of the two opposites. Or we're kind of hoarders or we're squanderers. Yeah, we're kind of accumulating all money or possessions, objects, anything that we can accumulate, and then on the other side, we find the one that is like giving everything away, like overusing it, let's say it, with money, and kind of wasting money, wasting time, wasting any other object or energy. Like, there's so many things related to these defects. They're like so broad, so big, that I cannot just put them into a couple of words. But it's very important to see that within ourselves. Okay? So here before we said that these defects converts us into beggars. It is said that usually a person that has like a very strong defect of hoarder or squander, that person can then in the next life or existence come as a beggar, because he was not able to manage all the things that were given to him or her. Yeah, so that is like a mismanagement that results in karma. Yeah, it results in karma. Remember that everything that we do, everything can be karma, yeah, or dharma. It just depends on our consciousness, our level of consciousness. But in here it is said that, yeah, if you don't know how to manage or deal with all the resources and things that are given to you, or if you're not fair, if you just want to accumulate and being greedy and just for you and not sharing it or not using it when it's necessary, or the opposite, that is just giving everything away and then like not having even a pair of coins or bills in your pocket to buy the essential things. Well, it's the same. Different degrees, the same thing, but we need to find the balance. So all this mismanagement is then resulting in a karmic situation. As an example, what I told you. In the next existence, you can be a beggar because you didn't know how to manage with that. So you need to learn how to manage the little things that can be given to you, or maybe not at all. So when you do not have balance, you generate karma. All right. Oh, something that I forgot to mention is that here this infradimension is connected to the intellectual center. So we know here we talk about that in the centers conference. All right, let's keep going. Now, the fifth dimension is the sphere of Mars. So as you can think of Mars like the fierce, the fiery sign planet, and the ruler of a very like alike sign, zodiac sign like Aries. Yeah, it's related to anger. So this defect is related to this infradimension. It manages our words and our actions. And here we will find our willpower. It's found in the throat, but just like right behind, inside our, like within our spine. Yeah, it's always in this area, but in the spine, and it's related to the motor center. Yeah. So we need to change the way in which we react to any given situation. So this defect is dealing with this. If we have the power and the will to stop it from reacting, because reactions are usually led by anger when we lack patience. So it's necessary to observe our impatience with each circumstances that arises. So if we have like a kind of discussion or like a little argument with someone, it depends on our reactions if that becomes something even bigger and worse with bigger consequences, or if we just stop it there, right? So it depends a lot on how we self-observe our inner world at that moment, and if we are able to stop that reaction. Yeah, it's very important to work on that. So self-observation will help us a lot with this. Okay, so here we find the anger, and then we find like details, like small defects that are like related to it, and they kind of like fit in the bigger one. They're making part of the bigger one. So we have the argumentative, who likes to always have arguments because he or she feels that it's always right and the others are not. We have the violence, that is like overreacting to a situation. We have the insulting, which is also super related to anger. Like a lot of people don't even notice it. It's like super unconscious. And yeah, it's like also an unconscious reaction towards another person. And then the attacker, that it's then becoming violent. Yeah, it's all moved by the anger. So these defects steal energy. They take your energy away. So when you're not self-observing yourself, you are identified with them. We are condemning the others. The other people are always wrong and I'm right, and I should be right because I know about this, because I have so much experience about this, and the others are not having all the understanding that I have, and we justify it. So he made me angry, so I had to hit him. He said something really bad to me and I couldn't say no, and I had to like punch him in the face or push him or hit him, whatever. Okay, so here we need to decide to act or not to act. That's all reflection, self-reflection. All right. All right. So remember that all these aspects are taking away our energy. Huh? In another conference we were talking about in the centers, the 7 centers, we were talking about that, like how the other centers are actually stealing the sexual creative energy. They're stealing it. If we are overusing the energy from the respective center, then it will take from the other center. Alright, let's go to the 6th infradimension. It's the sphere of Jupiter. Here we find the defect of tyranny. Yeah, so Jupiter is the all-giving father of the solar system. And here we find all the I's or defects related to tyranny. Okay, let me. Okay. Okay, so here the eyes that are related to tyranny, okay, we'll be covering them in a few while. Like there are so many. Tyranny can be achieved in different ways, not only physically but also in emotionally, mentally. Yeah, it's a big defect nowadays because everyone wants to tell the others what to do. Yeah, we see that a lot in the politicians and politics, how they are creating laws, creating all these kind of not really positive politics towards people, and it's usually them um, taking the best for them, like taking away all the rights and what belongs to the others and taking them from them. That's just an example. But tyranny can be found in different levels, like with your partner, with your family, with your friends, if you're a mother or father, with your daughters, with your son. Yeah, it's a big defect and it should be studied as well, because it has a lot of love trapped within. Those sparks of love are trapped within the tyranny, because the tyranny is always also kind of thinking that you know what's best for the others, so you force the others to act or do the things that you want because you think that's the best way, that should be the best way to do it. So it has love behind, because you want kind of good things for the others, but you're not respecting the will of that person. That's a problem. You're just imposing things that you think are good for the others, but without like regarding the others' ideas or emotions. Okay, it's just like a brief reflection upon that. Here dwell the eyes that are against love and the divine. Let's see a little bit more about this. So, the eyes that generate shortages and economic recession. So we have the hoarders, the owners, the kind of egoists, selfish, those who withhold, dictators, those who take away the free will of others. So I just gave you an example with the politicians. It's the same. How we are getting like so many dictatorships is because of that. It's because these people think that due to their experience, due to what they have went through in their lives, they think they have the right to decide for other people, for the destiny of the other people's lives. And what I said before, it has love trapped behind that. But then it becomes like also like a very strong and selfish desire to rule over the others, thinking that we're doing good, but then we're just oppressing the others' wills, which is not really nice. And we have also the eyes or defects that attack against love and the divine. That's what I said before. So we have the blasphemy, we have the atheist, the materialistic defects as well. So it's very, very important to start looking within ourselves, because remember, everything that we hold within, we find it outside. So if we kind of live in maybe a place that is having lots of troubles with dictatorships or dictators that are kind of ruling over the other's wills, well, maybe there is some part of it within ourselves. We're not in the place that we are right now because of a mere coincidence. It's because of something that is a process that is happening from karmic laws. So due to those karmic laws, there must be a reason why we are experiencing this life in this place. Okay. So those people think that they are helping the dictators, helping people, helping the society, but they're kind of even creating economic recessions. They're kind of creating a lot of lack of money among people, because they want to take all the money for them and distribute it and start telling the others how to use it. Yeah, so that's all related. And the others kind of say it's the same. It's like we are imposing what we think from our own experience in life and against love, because we are not respecting the will from other beings, from the other people, right? So this is very related to the higher intellectual center, and those defects that are related to blasphemy, atheism, materialistic, it's people that perceive life and the truth of life in a way that should be imposed to others because that's what they think it is, right? So again, here we find love. People that wish the others to perceive life like the way they do, kind of in a very simple way, but at the same time it's not respecting the will of the others, because we are so different. We have so many beliefs, different beliefs and experiences. And if an atheist is kind of trying to make the others also be atheist, even though the others have kind of experienced things that are not explained by the official science and back up their beliefs, it's really hard, yeah, to make the atheist understand that, because that's what he perceives as reality. Okay, all right. Let's go now to this. Oh, sorry. Okay, so as I said before, this dimension is related to the higher emotional center. Okay, say intellectual is higher emotional center. Now we're going to the higher intellectual center. In the 7th infradimension is the sphere of Saturn. So we find here again the fornication. You will see this word a lot in these studies, because we are not referring to it to only in a sexual way. It's different. It's a more general way talking about the energy. Okay, so here in the sphere of Saturn, it is in charge of managing nature. So it governs the earth and governs sex. Here we find the crimes committed against the Holy Spirit. Kind of say it's also very maybe religious term, against the Holy Spirit. We will be understanding this as we go through the conferences, what we refer to it. Remember that these are all the esoteric teachings of the Gnostics, and it's kind of a little bit related to the terms that we see in the Bible, but we're not seeing them in the same way. This is in a more profound way. Okay, so I just ask you to be kind of open-minded to these concepts, because we're not referring to any church or kind of Catholic or whatever thing you think it might sound like. It's not that. So crimes against Holy Spirit, against nature, yeah, Mother Nature. We find also violence against the art of creation. Okay, so when we say crimes against the Holy Spirit, crimes against nature, it's everything that we do, all our deeds that are kind of creating damage to ourselves and to the environment, to the earth, to the animals, to all the beings around us due to our ignorance. So if I say against the Holy Spirit, our Holy Spirit is something that we will be creating with our energy. So every time that we spell our energy through fornication, we are committing violence against ourselves because we don't know the consequences of that action. We just want to focus on the senses, on the pleasure, on the sensations, on all externalization of these desires, but not on the consequences that they might have. That explains a lot why our world nowadays is like so chaotic. We find a lot of chaos outside because there is a lot of chaos within. So many things that we don't know from ourselves, we also don't know from the universe and from the external world. Remember, it's all interconnected. And as I said before, this was expected from these Kali Yuga times. Yeah, the Vedas in like Hinduism kind of regarded a lot of this they give a lot of descriptions or characteristics of what this kind of Kali Yuga times will be, and this matches all with that description. Very hard times where spirituality is in decline and everything related to spirit is just so far away from our reach because we are so materialistic. So in that way we just focus on the physical senses, on everything that is physical, but we cannot perceive anything beyond that, such as the laws of the universe, right? The words like so clearly spread and known in the, let's say, the Satya Yuga or in the Dwapara Yuga, even in the Tetra Yuga, they were kind of more known and understood. But right now, ignorance is just leading us to our self-destruction. So that's why the Holy Spirit, the crimes against the Holy Spirit is against our own spirit, from against our own inner energy, from our inner creative energy, and against nature. I mean, this is something that we see nowadays everywhere, like pollution in the water, in the air, like the destruction of the forests, like killing animals just for our pleasure, just for keeping an industry that uses them, like so many things that we see nowadays. Yeah, and yeah, this is all ignorance because we ignore principles that are like so important for the balance. We need to know that. Yeah, so that's the violence against the art of creation. So we have the ability to create ourselves, to create these higher parts of ourselves, like which are mentioned are the superior bodies, to move not only in this physical form, but we are doing the opposite nowadays. Yeah, the practice of the infrasex nowadays is just leading us to self-destruction. Yeah, so that violence against our own energy, our own body, is like the same violence against the art of creation, because it's not letting us create, but it's helping us or leading us to destroy ourselves. So the eyes that attack against the Holy Spirit, we have the adultery, pornography, masturbator, prostitution, the homosexual, the rapist, everything that it's regarding like seeking pleasure, just the mere pleasure and the sensations, and not seeing the consequences of that. Like just like selfishly think about ourselves. Just look at right now how are these news coming out from the pedophile rings around the world, from like successful politicians and successful businessmen, even like very famous people. I don't want to mention them, but it's terrible. I mean, this has been normalized. Like, it's like super normal now for those people who ignore the principles of the universe, right? If they would know what happens to them when they do such things, not only to them but also to the other beings that are there, like being violent with, they wouldn't do it. Yeah, it's just ignorance that leads us to the catastrophe of our current state. Yeah. So although nowadays things like pornography or prostitution or homosexualism are kind of the norm, if we go deep into these studies, we will see the reason why they are not what we're looking for in this path. We need to create ourselves. We need to use our energy in a wise way, our sexual creative energy. So we're not looking for just mere pleasure. That doesn't mean that in the practice that you're not going to feel nice with your partner. Yes, you will. You will feel nice, but in a different way. Not in a mere sensation, like a sensorial way and sensual way. It will be in a superior way. And that's something that I can tell from experience, from practice. I'm not just inventing this. I'm not kind of coming here to invent all this stuff. It's something that it's been proved and practiced throughout many centuries. Obviously not in a open way, but now that like the group of people that are practicing this, they know what it feels like. Yeah. So just a mere comparison of both two people looking for consciousness to create themselves, to regenerate the physical body, because in the studies we will understand why our physical body is so sick and how is that related to our waters with our energy, sexual creative energy. We will understand the damage that has been done, performed during many existences, so that it just goes on to now, the present time, where you see that we have the consequences and the effects of that, of that violence against our own Holy Spirit from our own energy. So all these defects are just mere illusions. And I'm not saying by that they're not real. They are real in this three-dimension, world. But they're not real in the way that they're just perceived with five senses that are not the only senses that we can have as human beings, because we have a huge potential to have more than that, but we have chosen not to do it, right? So once we start changing them, we will notice the difference in our inner world. So many things will change, and we will be transforming ourselves, not only from our ideas and emotions and desires, but we will start feeling the way we live life in a completely different way, in a more transcendental way. So if you're looking for a transcendental path of knowing yourself, of starting to understand the way you acted in such way and transform that, this is the way. This is the way. You will see it as long as you are practicing. Okay. So yeah, this is like a much bigger topic. Maybe we will cover it later. We need to keep going. So there exists a violence against God in the will and intellect that negates all the possibility for the spiritual growth of man, right? So that's what we need, the will to do this, to change, to become better, to transform ourselves, because we have all the potential. If previous races from previous times could achieve such amazing things that we hear today in our, like in the scriptures from different religions, of course we can do that. We just need the will to transform, the will to be better. So the eyes that attack against nature or mother nature, like let's say like the polluters, deforastators, disrespectful, Yeah, we don't see Earth anymore like a living creature. We just see it like a mere mean for being rich. So if I kill this number of animals and I use their fur for the industry of whatever thing, I will get a lot of money. But that has consequences. Yeah, that has consequences. So a factory that creates like certain amount of objects, let's say something made out of wood, and it's creating a lot of pollution in the air. It's deforesting like a complete field of trees, and just because I will get a lot of money. Yeah, so it's the same. The lack of wisdom is leading us to our suffering. That's the same. Okay, so we need to work diligently on all these defects in order to achieve the true practice of suprasex. So we have two more dimensions to finish. We have the 8th dimension, the sphere of Uranus. It's located in the gonads, so in our sexual apparatus. It's related to the Holy Spirit, the creative sexual energy, also to our Divine Mother. It is the word in itself, or the truth. And just as I said before, the spirit. We find here the defects that are related to the lies, the liar defects. Yeah. Let's say like our sexual energy is that Holy Spirit that I mentioned before, and it's our same Divine Mother because she is the fire that we have to help us create ourselves. You will see that in the alchemy process. It's related to alchemy. And in this sphere, we have all the people that kind of they falsify religions, procedures, supplanters, and I can say that from my country, Colombia, it's very common here. Like, people are falsifying everything they can. So, yeah, so we know where they are now. So with the abuse of this center, we find various defects. So these are the defects. With fornication, we commit crimes against the Holy Spirit. We lose the power in the word, and therefore we appear following. Fornication, then we promise and we do not follow through, and then without words, there are no actions. So we're promising, and telling lies. I will do this, I will help you, I will go, I will see you at a time, I will see you there. All those like scenarios that are like daily scenarios are lies. We're lying to people. Yeah, even the smallest thing until the biggest one, it's related to death. Telling lies. Yeah, so they're kind of promising things that we cannot actually achieve. Promising and not doing it. That's something like we say, like we have no word. We're saying something and then people don't believe it. So where is the credibility? There isn't any credibility because people know that you're not like doing it. You're just promising things and not doing them. So that's something else that we also see on governments nowadays. Like they're promising and promising and promising things and telling lies to people, and then where is the credibility? Nowhere. They don't do it. And finally we have the 9th dimension, which is the sphere of Neptune. We find ourselves here in the sexual apparatus. Again, we have it there. In the man is phallus, and in the woman are Jejoni. Those are words from Hindu. Here we find all the eyes of treason in our psychology. So before we have the liars, but now we have the traitors. All right. You're thirsty. Yeah, so we have all the I's related to treason in our psychology. All the aspects of ill will. So they prefer to fulfill the will of the defects rather the one that it's related to the consciousness. Yeah, we kind of see it very often in our lives when we have that like to be or not to be situation when I know I have to meditate, but I do want to do that with my friend and go out for a coffee and gossip about my friends in the office, right? So at that point, I know I'm working on my consciousness, but am I really committed to it? Or am I just being like a traitor to my consciousness? Like, I know I have to do it, I know I need it, I know I need to meditate, I know I need to do these practices for feeling more spiritually balanced, but then there's something coming out of the blue and I just kind of don't do it, and then I just look for things that kind of give me pleasure. So in the esoteric world requires the discovery of each of our eyes of treason, which manifests throughout the day, just like the examples I gave you, like just watching TV instead of meditating, calling my friends and talking for hours instead of doing my practices. Yeah, things like that. So the traitor of desire, we have three types of traitors: the desire, the mind, and the ill will. Yeah, and you see that each of them is related also to the other dimensions that we were talking before, right? All right. So that traitor of desire, we are carried away by it. Remember, the desire is a force that is powerful and everything comes from there. So if we don't stop it, it will just start reaching the point of becoming an action. Then we have the traitor of the mind. We are constantly justifying, avoiding responsibilities, and blaming the others. Yeah, so I'm constantly blaming my partner or my friend or my mom or whatever for something that happened and it was even my fault. So I'm justifying everything, like always kind of blaming other situations or people instead of blaming myself because I know I was the one who created the situation. And the traitor of the will. We allow each of the defects to do as it wishes with our human machine. So with our body, physical body. Yeah. So this one is especially important to study, the ill will, or like the negative aspect of our like inaction, the not carrying any actions, like the lack of will. That traitor is very powerful. Kind of it becomes like the externalization of the other two, the desire and the thought, the mind, but it's like the result. Yeah, so that's very easy to look at it and then start discovering the others, right? So just inviting you to do it. Okay, so the psychological eyes that attack against our consciousness against our conscious will. So we have like the washing hands and the justifying. They're very related to the ill will. Each psychological eye that executes its own will limits the will of the consciousness. So every time we avoid what we have to do towards our consciousness, when we betray our consciousness, then we're letting the will of our ego or our defects to take over us, and then it's their will, not our will. So that is why we say that we are actually not free. Yeah, if you're looking for freedom in like getting a lot of pleasure and a lot of things from the external world and get whatever you want from the external world, that's not being free. That's actually being a slave of our ego, of our desires. Okay, so from these infradimensions, we can rescue the light trapped within the darkness of our inner infernos and reintegrate it with the wisdom. So, as I said at the beginning, everything we want to rescue from there, from these infradimensions, which are the place where we find the defects, they kind of, we have to rescue this light, this spark, that wisdom, that love that is been trapped within the darkness of our own inner lower dimensions, from our inner world. So we teach and inspire our student the practice of psychological depth. That's very important. That's the tool that will help us transform ourselves, so we can transform the world outside. Right, this was our conference from today. I hope that it helps you understand how our own psychological aspects are found in this inner infradimensions. Yeah, how we are related to them and what we need to do, and all the different things and aspects that we find within each of them. Okay, so I hope you like this conference, and I hope it helped you understanding a little bit more this concept of the infradimensions, which is not a concept at all, but a reality that each one of you, as you go along the path, you will see it. Okay, thank you for coming, and next conference will be the 7 bodies. This is a huge, very essential, really important topic. We will be discussing this and teaching you the practice of suprasex, right? So have a nice day and see you next week.